Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Krap, Sawadee Krap. Welcome to all of you guys here at the temple, and welcome to everyone joining us online. This is the first day of our course titled Experiencing the Jhanas and the Four Stages of Enlightenment. In this course, you're going to learn all about the jhanas, what they are, how you experience them, how to actually get to that point where you are experiencing the jhanas, as well as the four stages of enlightenment. We're going to go in detail on these topics and some others as well that you're going to need as you make your way to the jhanas and through the four stages of enlightenment. So welcome to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. We're going to start our class with a meditation, just like we typically do with all of our classes. And then afterwards, I'm going to introduce you to the course and help you understand what it is that you're going to be learning over the next 5 days. And then we're going to move into our first topic today, which is the Eightfold Path. And then this afternoon, I'm going to be sharing with you the three poisons. Now, for some of you guys, this is going to be a review, kind of a nice refresher, but this is what you need in order to understand and be able to get to the jhanas, is you're going to need to be able to deeply practice the Eightfold Path. So even if you've learned this with me before, it's really helpful to refresh your memory on this and be sure you're dialing it in really, really closely, because it's the Eightfold Path that's going to ultimately produce the jhanas. But we'll talk about what these jhanas are and all these other things as we go in the course. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I'm going to start with the chanting, then we're going to move into the guidance, then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we'll be meditating, and then we'll come out of the meditation with some chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivadeyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma สติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose, or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะเกวาพุทธังมหะเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหะเกวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหะเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโหโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Again, welcome to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone here. Welcome to everyone online. It's really wonderful to see so many of you that have been studying for a while, both here at the temple and also online. And also welcome to those of you guys that haven't been studying, and maybe this is one of your first courses with me. This course is designed that whether you've been studying extensively and following along and learning all the various teachings that are shared by the Buddha, or if you're just starting out, you can actually learn in this particular course. And this is the reason why we're starting with the Eightfold Path, because for those of you guys that are new to the path to enlightenment, or at least new with studying with me in the words of the Buddha, you can learn the Eightfold Path through the original words of the Buddha. And for those of you guys that have been studying, whether you're here at the temple or online, this is a great refresher for you to be able to learn and really dial in the Eightfold Path really closely. So we're going to be talking about that here in a moment. But what I'm going to do first is just introduce you guys to the course so that you can understand what it is that we're going to be exploring over the next 5 days. This course is titled Experiencing the Jhanas and the Four Stages of Enlightenment, because this is a course where you can penetrate into understanding what the jhanas are and what the four stages of enlightenment are and how to actually attain them. And there's other topics besides these that you're going to need in order to make your way to these jhanas, like developing concentration and other things that you're going to see here in a moment that I'm going to be sharing with you throughout the 5 days. So this is some contact information. Sometimes students like to have this either during the course or after the course. You're always welcome to contact me at any time during the course or even after the course as well. If you're coming to class and you're behind schedule, or maybe you're just not even coming to class at all, it's okay. You don't have to let me know. You can just show up, and if you're here, I'll teach you. If you come in a little bit late, that's okay. I'll still teach you. If you decide not to come one day and you come another day, that's completely fine too. You don't need to let let me know about all the different impermanence that's going on in your life, you're welcome to if you'd like, but you don't have to. But this contact information is more for you after this course, that you might need to contact me at different times in order to help you and guide you on the path. And this is all available on our website, but I usually share it at the beginning of a course like this so that you'll have it. In terms of the way that our course is structured, it's very much structured in the way that I structure other courses, where we start out each morning with some chanting and meditation at 9 a.m. I'll be starting that right at 9 a.m. You guys are welcome to join for that. Then by 9:30, I'll be sharing some teachings, and I think of these as discussions. They're not lectures, they're not sermons, they're not anything like this. Oftentimes people refer to this as a dhamma talk, because dhamma means teachings, so we're talking about the teachings. I think of it as a discussion where I'm sharing teachings with you guys. You guys are asking questions about those, getting clarification, and we're diving into the actual topics that are going to be needed in order to help you get to enlightenment, because you can't just meditate your way to enlightenment. You're going to need more than just meditation. So that's why it's important to have these talks for you to develop your wisdom of the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught. Somewhere in the morning, we'll be taking a mid-morning break, usually around 10:30 or 11, somewhere around there. We usually take a mid-morning break, and then we come back, and then after that, we have some more discussion on whatever topics we're discussing. We go to lunch usually around 12, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. This is impermanence. And we usually take about an hour and a half lunch break, coming back around 1:30 or so. Each day before we go to lunch, I'll let you guys know what time we're starting over, and starting in the afternoon. And then in the afternoon, I'll be sharing some more teachings and discussion with meditation. So we're going to be meditating in the morning, meditating in the afternoon, and then we're going to have teachings in both portions of those. And then we finish usually around 3 o'clock. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, but if we go to 3:15 or 3:30, I'd be really surprised. Typically, the classes are ending right around 3:05, 3:10, something like this. But just understand that this isn't hard fast, that there's some flexibility there, that because of impermanence, we might end a little bit earlier or end a little bit later. Then this particular course, it's based on this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is the first book of the book series that I share. In each one of these courses, I share different chapters of this book. There is a program called the Group Learning Program where I share every single chapter in the book over a 7-month period. But each one of these 5-day courses, I'm sharing certain chapters from the actual book. So in this particular course, it's chapter 3, 4, 5, 8, 11, 16, 17, 18, and 20. And in other courses, I share other variations of those. So you can get this book by downloading it for free from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon as well. There's printed versions and Kindle versions on Amazon that you can use. And this is the first book of the book series. And reading the book and attending the classes, a combination of this will help you be fully informed, because there are certain things in the book that aren't in the classes, and there's certain things in the classes that aren't in the book. So if you're reading this either before or after class, or before the course or after the course, this will really help you to be fully informed. These are the topics for the course and what you're actually going to be learning. This morning, I'm going to be sharing with you the Eightfold Path, the path for all humans to enlightenment. This is going to also encompass the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths. If you're interested in getting to the jhanas or any of the stages of enlightenment taught by the Buddha, you would need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards. You're going to need to know it like the back of your hand and dialing it in closer and closer. So I'm going to be talking about this more in an overview sense, where I will be going into detail in certain parts of the Eightfold Path, but because this course, oftentimes students have been learning with me and they've studied the Eightfold Path and other programs that I share. Usually in this course, I kind of give you a nice overview, but giving you some depth in certain areas. But at any point that we're talking about the Eightfold Path, if there's something that you would like more detail on, feel free to ask questions and dive into that. Not just with the Eightfold Path, but any of these topics. Because the way that a teacher will typically teach is we teach to a certain level of detail, and then we wait for students to decide to go deeper into the actual teachings. So if there's this topic about the Eightfold Path or any of these other topics that you would like to get details on, there's oftentimes multiple layers of detail that I'm not talking about, because I'm just waiting to see what students are interested in talking about. If I taught you every single thing that I know about the Eightfold Path, that might be a 5-day course right there by itself. So that's why I teach at a certain level of detail, and then I wait for the students to decide to go deeper into the actual actual teaching. So as you guys would like detail on any of these topics, feel free to ask questions. And then for those of you guys here at the temple, if you could ask questions with the microphones here in the white bowl, that way the people online will be able to hear you. And then for those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and open up your mic and ask any questions that you like. We'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and then also they'll be able to hear you on the live stream. If you end up picking up a mic, you're welcome to take it back to your seat and keep it with you, because you may have more than one question, or people around you might have questions. You're welcome to keep that with you. You just press the gray button on the front of the mic. You'll see the lights come on. It just takes about a second or two for it to engage, and then you just hold it up to your chin, and then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. Then this afternoon, when we come back after our meditation, we're going to be sharing Transforming the Three Poisons, Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you're going to broaden your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind, and also deepen your understanding of what's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state, and helping you to see the solutions to transforming the mind as well. Because it's these three poisons that are hindering the mind from being able to experience the jhanas in the 4 stages of enlightenment. It's getting rid of these, eliminating them from the mind, that is actually going to produce the jhanas in the 4 stages of enlightenment. Then tomorrow we're going to be discussing the jhanas. This, I refer to it as the light bulb is flickering, because when you're experiencing the jhanas, these are what's preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment. This is one of the real first clear indications that you're putting together your practice really well, because you start seeing these enhanced qualities of mind as your mind's moving through these jhanas. And as I mentioned, these are preliminary phases that your mind's experiencing on your way to enlightenment. And these qualities that you experience in the jhanas, it's not just during meditation. Oftentimes people think that the jhanas are only experienced during meditation, but these qualities that you experience are actually experienced all during your day. So we're going to talk about each jhana individually so that you can understand what they are, and you can understand when you're experiencing these. So I'm going to go into each individual jhana and explaining what they are and how to know whether you're in a particular jhana or not. Then I'm also going to explain to you the 4 stages of enlightenment. This is where your mind's moving from the jhanas into these 4 stages, and I'm going to show you how you can know that your mind's moving through these 4 stages, and ultimately the 4th stage of enlightenment itself. Because when you get to the 4th stage, which is often referred to as arahant or as an enlightened being, at this point your mind's no longer experiencing any discontentedness. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of that is eliminated from the mind. The mind's experiencing peace and joy, calmness, serenity, contentedness. There's focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. Your personal, professional relationships are blossoming and they're at ease. You're being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all people around you. You'll notice you're not even in a bad mood anymore by the time you get to that 4th stage of enlightenment. And you're going to see the various qualities starting to come through and shine through the mind as you're making your way through the jhanas in the 4 stages of enlightenment. So I'm going to be teaching you about these. Then we're going to be going into the 10 fetters and spending an entire class period just on the 10 fetters. There's a retreat that I'm going to be teaching in August where I'm going to be spending an entire class period on each individual fetter. But here in this particular course, we're going to be spending 1 class period on the fetters themselves. So we might be talking about each fetter for maybe 10, 15 minutes for each particular fetter. And that way you're gaining some information, you're gaining some understanding of these fetters, but ultimately it's the retreat in August that's going to go into the most detail about these. These are the 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered that is hindering the mind from experiencing enlightenment, and it's understanding these and eradicating them from the mind that produces the enlightened mind itself. Then on Wednesday morning, I'll be sharing with you how to train the mind to acquire concentration, because this is one of the qualities that the mind's going to have as it's starting to move through the jhanas and into the 4 stages of enlightenment. The mind is going to become more concentrated. So I'm going to teach you how to get this concentration, because you're going to need it as you're applying all the wisdom of the Buddha in your day-to-day life. You're going to need to be concentrated. If your mind's unstable and unsteady and it's shaken up and you're not focused and clear in your day-to-day life, you're not going to be able to apply apply your wisdom when you're having that conversation with your mom or your dad, or you're on the phone with a customer service agent and they're being rude or disrespectful perhaps, and you're needing to focus and concentrate and apply your wisdom with right speech and all these other teachings. So you're going to need the concentration. Even when you're just washing dishes, if you're just washing dishes, you need concentration in doing that. Or if you're driving or some other thing, or if you have children and you're talking to your children, you're going to need to be focused and concentrated, because sometimes in life things can be happening really quickly around you. And if your mind's not focused and concentrated, you're not going to be able to apply your wisdom to make wise decisions in those moments. So the concentration is so important for you to be able to access your wisdom and make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. Then I'm going to be teaching you about the ego. This is a very detrimental thing to the mind in your practice, because when you have ego, there's a certain amount of arrogance and pride and boastfulness in the mind. There's this judging of other people, putting yourself above others and below others, comparing yourself to other people, wanting to either be above them or putting yourself below them. And this is really detrimental to your mind, because oftentimes when there's ego in the mind, people around you will reject you and push you aside, and you'll find it very challenging to have harmonious relationships. So I'm going to be teaching you about the ego, what it is, and how to eliminate it. We're going to be going into detail about the things that you can be doing to work on your ego and eliminating it, because the ego isn't something that is going to be eliminated very easily or very quickly. It's going to take many, many years to gradually wear this away. So the more that you understand about it and the tools and techniques to eliminate it, the better. So the sooner you get started on working on eliminating the ego, the better. So we're going to be talking about that in this course as well. Then we're going to be going into the cycle of rebirth a little bit and kind of talking about that, where I'm going to help you to understand how the mind in the human world oftentimes is coming out of the animal realm, and there's an animal consciousness that we experience in all these different animal existences. But when we come into the human world, we're in a human existence, but oftentimes our mind is conditioned by what we've experienced in the animal realm with so many countless births. This is why oftentimes people think of human beings as animals, but we're not animals. But oftentimes we do function like an animal in the unenlightened state, because our mind has been conditioned from so many animal existences. So I'm going to help you to understand this so you can start seeing this for yourself, how the unenlightened human mind functions very much like an animal. And then you can understand what these animalistic instincts are, so that what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're becoming a better and better human being. You're shedding these animalistic instincts and becoming this better and better human being. So understanding what the animalistic instincts are and how to shed them and where they're coming from can actually help you as you're developing on the path to enlightenment. Then I'm going to be teaching you about fears, what's causing these fears and how to actually eliminate them. There's specific things you can do. If there's a fear of death, if you have a fear of death, or if you have fear of spiders, or you have the fear of heights or snakes, or fear of being poor or lonely or things like this, any kind of fear that you have in your mind, I'm going to teach you how to actually eliminate it by going in and talking about this in detail. Then we're going to be discussing this being of God. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha didn't teach about God, or rejected God, or that he never taught about God or anything like this, or he denied the existence of God. This isn't actually true, but oftentimes people think this way if they haven't been studying the original teachings of the Buddha. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this being, because on your journey to enlightenment, you can have a relationship with this being and still get to enlightenment, or you can choose not to have a relationship with this being and still get to enlightenment as well. And depending on what your choice is, you're going to need to know certain details and certain information in terms of having a relationship with this being. If you've been taught to fear this being, if you've been taught to worship this being, if you've been taught that this being is controlling you or punishing you or do these kinds of things, these are all things that are going to hinder you from being able to have a peaceful and harmonious relationship with this being. But also you might actually have hatred or anger towards this being, depending on what it is that you've been taught in the past. So if you're not interested in having a relationship with this being, I'm going to teach you how to do that without anger and hatred in your mind too. Or if you're interested in having a relationship, it's important that you don't have anger and hatred towards this being. So I'm going to teach you about this being of God. Then I'm going to be teaching you what's called the 5 hindrances. These are obstructions to your enlightenment. These are 5 things that are going to block you or stop you from getting to enlightenment. So understanding what those are and how to overcome them will help you to be able to make your way through the jhanas and to enlightenment itself. Then I'm going to be teaching you how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. This is really helpful because if you're making your way to enlightenment, you'd like to be able to know whether you've attained it or not. If you've attained enlightenment, you will know that you have attained enlightenment. I teach people not to convince themselves that they have attained enlightenment, but you will know that you've attained enlightenment. And we'll talk about the reason why I teach people not to convince themselves that they've attained enlightenment. We'll be talking about that during the course. Then I'm going to be helping you develop your meditation practice. There's 4 meditations that the Buddha taught. And in our foundational programs, I teach you in the foundational course, breathing mindfulness meditation. In the harmony and relationships course, I teach you loving kindness meditation. And we're going to be doing those as part of this course. But also I'm going to be teaching you these other 2 meditations too, which is meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. This is like if you have excessive sexual cravings, or maybe you're indulging in a lot of masturbation or pornography or things like this, or maybe you have a lot of sexual partners and you're trying to bring that down, or maybe you have one sexual partner and you and that person have decided that you're no longer going to have sexual activity, but you still have these cravings for sex. There's a meditation that you can do to reduce and or eliminate sexual cravings. And then there's a meditation to help you realize non-self. This is to eliminate personal existence view. I'm going to be teaching you about that in this course as well. And we're going to be doing the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. You can use any of these positions at any times during the course. I've taught these at other times in the various programs and courses and retreats that I share. So even though I might not be specifically saying, okay, let's do lying meditation or standing meditation, at any point that you would like to invoke any of those positions or walking meditation, you're welcome to do that at any time. I'll probably be teaching in the seated position because of the camera and it's a fixed location, but you can feel comfortable to do any of these positions of meditation during the entire course. And then, of course, you guys are going to be doing the Buddhist chanting, and it's great. I started hearing some Buddhist chanting here. This is good, starting to hear it a little bit. So that means you guys must be chanting a bit. So this is really nice to hear the community starting to do a bit of chanting. And then I'll share with you at the very end of the course how to receive continued support in your journey. So any questions on what we're going to be discussing in our course? Anything you guys would like to ask about? Let me see if there's anything online. Okay, I'm not seeing anything online either. So we already did breathing mindfulness meditation. So let's talk about the Eightfold Path. I refer to this as the path for all humans to enlightenment, because without this teaching, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. This is the path to enlightenment. It's the core central teaching of the Buddha, where everything else plugs into this particular teaching. And this is why each one of these courses, each one of these retreats, I'm always starting with the Eightfold Path at some point at the very beginning, either the first day or second day of the course, because students need to revisit it multiple times. But also, I never know who's going to be in these courses. And sometimes there's brand new students that have never learned with me in these courses, or someone online who's coming in to learn a particular course that have never even met me or never been here to Chiang Mai. So I start each particular course with the Eightfold Path because it's a great refresher for people that have been learning with me, but it's also the place to start for any student who's starting to learn with the original words of the Buddha, is starting with the Eightfold Path. So this Eightfold Path is organized into 3 sections: the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. I'm going to walk through each one of these with you, each one of these steps. It starts with right view, then it goes right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. In each one of these steps, we're going to use the words of the Buddha to be able to help you understand each one of these steps. I'm going to be starting with right view because right view helps you establish an understanding of what the problem is in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So we're going to be starting with that. But then we're going to ultimately be moving through each one of these sections. Whenever we're studying moral conduct related to the teachings of the Buddha, it's important that you don't see it as rules or commandments, or that he's trying to force you or control you to do any particular thing. He's helping you to see this natural law of dhamma, of cause and effect, or action and result. Because the way that we choose choose to conduct ourselves in the world through our moral conduct is going to determine what we experience. So for example, if we're bitter, harsh, and hostile through our moral conduct, through our intentions, our speech, our actions, and that's what we're putting out, that's what we're going to experience coming back to us. So he's teaching you the moral conduct so that you can see the cause and effect, that it's your decisions to say, be harsh in your speech. And when you're harsh in your speech, that's going to produce the people around you being harsh and aggressive with you. So they're not rules or commandments. He's not trying to convince you to do anything. He's just helping you see this cause and effect, or this action and result. We call it causality, or the natural law of dhamma. So we're going to be going into that in detail. And then ultimately talking about the mental discipline, because this is where through the mental discipline, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. You would need the moral conduct as well in order to experience the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment, but you really need to hone in the mental discipline in order to experience the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. Without the mental discipline section, you wouldn't be able to experience moving into the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. You wouldn't have enough wisdom to be able to make your way through that. Through improving your moral conduct, you would experience some improvement in your life, but the mind's not going to actually get to the jhanas without the mental discipline. So you need all 8 steps in order to get into the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. So here, this is the words of the Buddha on right view, the very first step of the Eightfold Path. What he's sharing here is he's sharing the 4 Noble Truths. He's saying that is right view. He's saying, in what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view. What he's doing here is he's pointing to another teaching, but he's not going into detail on the 4 Noble Truths here because he describes it in another teaching. But he's pointing to it and saying that is right view. So underneath of this line here, I just have the top section of the 4 Noble Truths. There's more underneath of this, but I'm showing you the correlation and the connection so that you can build confidence that yes, what he's talking about in the right view is the 4 Noble Truths. And now I'm going to teach you the 4 Noble Truths so that you can understand what this is and walk you through it. To understand the 4 Noble Truths, you need to first understand the 3 Universal Truths. We refer to these as truths because the Buddha knows that they're true. I know that they're true. Other people know that they're true. But in order for you to benefit, you're going to need to know that they're true. So when you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, you need to be able to learn them, investigate them, examine them. Then you reflect on those teachings to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you practice the teachings, integrating them into your life. You're not interested in believing the teachings. You don't believe anything on this path. If you just tried to believe things, you wouldn't know what's true or false, and your mind could still easily be shaken up. But when you know the truth, your mind can be stable and steady because nobody's going to shake you off of that truth, right? So if you grew up with the idea of Santa Claus, at some point your mind was shaken up when you found out that Santa Claus wasn't true because you had this belief in Santa Claus. But then once you knew the truth, there's nobody that could ever convince you that Santa Claus exists. Your mind is stable and steady and confident and confirmed on that topic. And the same thing needs to happen with all of these teachings related to the path to enlightenment, is you need to get to the point where you know the truth and your mind is confident and confirmed on what the truth is. And this is what we mean when we say awakening to wisdom and acquiring wisdom, that you need to be able to know the truth through your own independent verification, not through belief. So here I'll show you what I mean because I'm going to help you to learn it. I'm going to help you reflect on these and help you learn how to integrate them into your life so that you can practice them and experience the benefits and the results. So this first universal truth of impermanence, I can teach it to you in about a minute or so, and then you need to reflect in order to independently verify it. What the Buddha shares with you about the universal truth of impermanence is that things are constantly changing. There's something called conditioned objects. Conditioned objects, they arise, they change, and they fade away. This is a conditional object, that it's arising, it's changing, and it's fading away. This is an impermanent object. All conditioned objects are going to decay. All conditioned objects are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away because they are impermanent. And everything around you in the material world is all impermanent. It's constantly changing. And this is an important building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths when we get to that. So there's conditioned objects like this body that you have. You can reflect on this and you can see that this body is constantly changing, right? From the time of birth or even from the time of conception, we've been constantly changing. This body's been constantly changing. You can see that your relationships have been constantly changing. You can see that your bank account is constantly changing, going up and down and up and down. You can see the weather is constantly changing. All these things are experiencing constant change because they are impermanent. Even this carpet at the temple, at one time it was brand new, but now it's got some stains on it. It's got some marks on it. The fabric's wearing off. It kind of fluffs off every once in a while. It's constantly changing. You can see the walls of the temple. The paint's different colors. There's marks. There's holes. This is all impermanence. You can see your hair, your skin complexion. You might get a pimple or a mole or something like this. You can see you have people coming in and out of your life, constant change in your life. Your job or occupation is constantly changing. So this is what the Buddha is talking about with impermanence, is that conditioned objects will arise, change, and fade away. And you can independently verify that. But then there's something called unconditioned objects. Unconditioned objects, they don't change. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. They are permanent, right? So while I say here that everything in the world is impermanent, that means all material objects are impermanent. All conditioned objects are impermanent. But there is something called an unconditioned object. The mental state of enlightenment, this is an unconditioned object, that there's no conditions that are producing the enlightened mind, and this is why it's permanent. The natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, these are unconditioned. They're permanent. This is why his teachings apply 2,500 years ago, and they apply today too, because these natural laws of existence haven't changed. They're unconditioned. If you have been able to understand unconditional love, this is permanent too, because there's no condition that's producing this. So it's not possible for you to fall in love with people and out of love with people because you just love them. And you might have this for maybe some relatives or your children or people like this in your life, no matter what they do, even if they went out and murdered someone. Not that you would support them in doing that, not that you would agree with what they decided, but even if they decided to do that, you would still have love for them and you would still have care for them. This is unconditional love. This is permanent, right? So there are these conditioned objects that are impermanent, that arise, change, and fade away. And then there's unconditioned objects, which do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. Then there's this second universal truth. It's called discontentedness. Here, the Buddha is explaining to you the unenlightened mind and what the unenlightened mind experiences. Some people refer to this as suffering. If you've studied the teachings of the Buddha in other places, they might have translated this as suffering. I don't use the word suffering because when the Buddha is talking about this, in the original Pali language, he's using the word dukkha, and people are translating that to some other word, and oftentimes you see suffering. But when he talks about dukkha, he explains that the unenlightened mind experiences pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. And the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness fits this much better. That the mind is shaken up, it's uncalm, it's unsteady. That's essentially what he's talking about. He's describing these conditioned feelings that the mind experiences, that the mind experiences things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria, based on some condition. Maybe it's sunny outside, so you get happy. Or maybe you get a raise at work, so you're happy or excited. Or maybe your mom's coming to visit you, so you get excited or happy, right? This is a pleasant feeling based on some condition. Some condition is producing it. But then there's painful feelings that the unenlightened mind experiences, like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. These are all very painful to experience. And those are also occurring based on some condition. They are a conditioned feeling. And then there's neither painful nor pleasant. And for me, I put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category if you like. But something like shyness, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. It's neither painful nor pleasant. Or if somebody came and sat close to you, like on a bus or something like this, and their body was touching your body, you might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. Maybe you're just kind of uncomfortable or dissatisfied. This is the neither painful nor pleasant feeling. But in these situations, what's happening here is the mind is shaken up. It's discontent. It's experiencing discontentedness. The mind is discontented. You're not suffering when you're experiencing happiness or excitement or elation. You're not suffering. Or if that person you don't know came and sat close to you on the bus and your body was touching their body, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering there. So I don't use the word suffering because it only explains the painful feelings. The anger, the sadness, the frustration, the stress, the guilt, the shame. You probably say you're suffering when you're experiencing that. But if you only use that word suffering, then you're only understanding 33% of what the Buddha is teaching on this important topic. So it's important that you understand the full spectrum of feelings and emotions that the unenlightened mind is experiencing so that you can fully eradicate the discontent feelings. Because you need to understand that those conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much part of the problem as the painful ones. Now remember, we're talking about conditioned feelings here, where the mind is forming some feeling based on a condition, that it can only be happy when these things occur, right? That is part of the problem, that the mind experiences less and less and less and less happiness as your expectations and your wants grow. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're always happy, you're always joyful, but you're experiencing unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy. So here in what this particular universal truth is explaining is that the unenlightened mind is going to experience these conditioned feelings. Essentially, the mind's going to be going up and down and up and down at different times throughout your day or throughout your week or throughout your month. And this is the problem that the Buddha discovered, is this discontentedness that the mind experiences. So you can independently verify this, just like the first one, because you know that your mind is unenlightened, and you can look over the experiences that you've had in life, and you can see that the Buddha is accurately describing that the mind experiences some conditioned feeling, like I'm so excited that it's sunny, or I'm so happy and excited that mom is coming to visit, or I'm so excited that I got a raise at work. But then when you don't get what you want, the mind goes to the sadness or the anger or the frustration. Maybe it rains, so you get angry. Or maybe your bank account balance goes down low, so you get frustrated. Or maybe your mom cancels, that she's not able to come to see you like she originally intended. And now you might be angry or frustrated about that. That is the problem, the discontentedness. And you can independently verify that you're experiencing this through the various experiences that you've had in life. Then there's the universal truth of non-self. This is the solution to the first fetter that the Buddha has in the 10 fetters. The first fetter is called personal existence view. This is where the Buddha helps you to understand that what you're experiencing is this pollution or this taint or this defilement, this fetter that is keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. The first fetter is called personal existence view. This is where the mind is clinging to the self-image or the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. So now the mind clinging to this self-image, if you have agreeable contact about the way this body appears, like maybe somebody compliments you and says, wow, you're so handsome, or you're so beautiful, or wow, I really like your hair or your clothes or your jewelry. I really like the way this body looks, is essentially what they're saying. You might get these pleasant feelings based on the condition that they're complimenting you about this body. But it's only a matter of time before you hear somebody that says something degrading and disparaging about this self-image. Because of impermanence, not everybody's going to talk to you polite and kind and friendly and respectful, right? So now if you get those pleasant feelings when somebody compliments this body and how it looks, now when they say something degrading or disparaging, you'll feel sad and you'll feel frustrated and agitated. So the Buddha is teaching you not to cling to this body as who you are as a person. So if you've ever spilled something on your clothing and you're like in a social situation and you get embarrassed, this is because of personal existence view. Maybe you spilled pizza sauce or maybe chocolate ice cream or something like this on your clothing, and now you're embarrassed at this party, right? This is because of personal existence view. You're not being perceived in the world the way that the mind wants this body to be perceived. The mind thinks that this body is you. Or if you've ever been in the mirror looking at a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, and you've been shaken up by that, this is because of personal existence view. The mind is thinking that this body is you. Or maybe you get a little extra fat here and there. Maybe you're shaken up by that, right? This is the mind having personal existence view. And the part of it is the self-image, but the other part is the self-identity. This is what the mind clings to in the mind, thinking that you are maybe a certain culture, a certain ethnicity, maybe a certain sexual orientation, maybe a job or occupation, maybe a nationality, that if you have the thought of I am something, right? Like I am a police officer, or I am German, or I am an Aussie, or I am a Brit, or I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am a food server, or I am a great tipper, or I am kind, or I am polite. Any of this I am, this is the identity that the mind is clinging to. And once again, when you have agreeable contact, someone might say, all Chinese people are so loving and kind, or all Japanese people are loving and kind. You'll get these pleasant feelings because you identify with that as being who you are. But then when you hear something degrading or disparaging about these things, then you'll feel frustrated and agitated because you're identifying with that. So if somebody says all Buddhist teachers are loving and kind and friendly, if I identified with I am a Buddhist teacher, now I'll feel excited or happy or elated that someone's acknowledging that. But then it's only a matter of time before somebody says something degrading and disparaging about Buddhist teachers, right? I see this sometimes online on Facebook, right? So if my mind identified with I am a Buddhist teacher, now the mind's going to be shaken up by that. So it's an understanding that there's a certain role that you fulfill, perhaps, like I'm performing this role of being a Buddhist teacher, but that's not who I am as a person. It doesn't define who I am as a person. Or it's a matter of understanding that this body was born on a certain land, but you don't have to adopt the identity of I am American, for example. Just because this body was born on a particular land, that doesn't make me a particular person. I don't need to identify with that as who I am, because I can't control what other people say and what other people do. All I can do is control my own mind. So if my mind adopts the identity of I am American, when somebody says something degrading or disparaging about Americans, then the mind would be shaken up. Or say you were a police officer and you identify with that's who you are as a person, but now you retire, or maybe you get injured at work, or you get fired and you can't do this job anymore. You'll feel like less of a person. You'll feel diminished or degrading because you're no longer performing that role. Or if you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identify with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, I am a wife, when you're in that relationship, your identity feels intact, so you feel good. But then when you separate and now you're no longer together, you'll struggle because now I am single. And my mind doesn't identify that way. So if you have this identity of I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend, when you're single, your mind will struggle with that, and you might want to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. So these are some of the complications that an individual experiences when they have personal existence view. But the solution to that is the universal truth of non-self, is realizing that this body nor this mind is you or who you are. And there's certain training that you employ in order to help you. And we're going to be talking about this when we get to dissolving the ego, because this personal existence view is part of the ego. So I'm going to be teaching you some proactive techniques of how to realize non-self, to realize that this body isn't you and this mind isn't you. It's not who you are. So I'm going to be teaching you how to proactively eliminate it through various tools and techniques that you can employ to strip this away from the mind, so that then you can reside more peaceful and joyful. If somebody says, wow, you look so beautiful, you look so handsome, you might say thank you. You might be appreciative of that. But then when somebody says something degrading or disparaging, you won't be affected by it. Right? If someone starts mocking your hairstyle or clothing that you're wearing or the way that this body looks, you wouldn't be affected by it. You still might not choose to associate with that person. It's like they're being so negative and degrading, you might choose to kind of move on in your day, but nonetheless, your mind can remain peaceful and joyful because you don't identify with any of this as being who you are. Okay, so you can independently verify this universal truth of non-self by looking at your life when you were a child, when you were a teenager, early adulthood, and then now, and you can see how your perspective of who you are, your character, your personality has been constantly changing, that there isn't a permanent self. You can also think of it this way, that if your arm was amputated and you only had one hand and one arm, ask yourself, are you less of a person? Most people will say no, that they're not less of a person. So intellectually, your mind understands that this body isn't you. But the mind is confused with this pollution of personal existence view, that the mind has this misunderstanding that when you go out into the world and somebody says something about this body in a negative or degrading way, your mind gets shaken up by that. But intellectually, you know that this body isn't you, because if your arm was amputated and you had one hand and one arm, most people usually say, yeah, I'm not less of a person. I just have less use of a hand and an arm. So intellectually, your mind can understand something, but it can be confused and have misunderstanding when you go out into the world and you hear things about this body. You can be shaken up by that because of this pollution or this confusion or misunderstanding that the mind has. And then sometimes I invite students to point to themselves. I say, where are you? Right? And this is a way to independently verify the universal truth of non-self. And sometimes people will point, and I say, well, what are you pointing to? A shirt. That's what you're pointing to, a shirt. So ask yourself, is that who you are? That shirt you're wearing, is that you? No, that's not you, right? Because you change the shirt all the time. Because if I held up this shirt and I pointed to it and I said, is that David? Is that who David is? You guys would probably say, no, that's not you. Okay, so we get rid of the shirt. Where are you? And someone might point. And what are you pointing to? You're pointing to skin. Is that skin you? That skin that you have? Is that who you are? Right? People say, no, that's not you. So then what else do you got? You got bones, you got fluids, you got organs, you got muscle tissue. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you. But the challenge in the unenlightened mind is it will cling to this, thinking that this is who you are. And this is where the mind gets shaken up. So the universal truth of non-self is helping you to eliminate any clinging to this body or this mind, thinking that this is who you are. Okay, so this is the three universal truths. Any questions here? This is probably a review for some of you, and maybe some of you it's the first time you've been learning. Yeah, you can get the mics and ask any questions that you like. And those of you guys online, if you would like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom.
I have great difficulties with this teaching of non-I. Like, for example, for me, it's very important to take responsibility for what I'm doing. If I say, I don't exist, that would lead to contradictions. Like, for example, I've done something bad or something good. I want to stand up for that, don't I? So if I say, I don't exist, that would lead to an obvious contradiction. And similarly, when I think of all the moral precepts in Buddhism, like for example, non-stealing, non-killing, not lying, if you don't exist and I don't exist, all these precepts become meaningless. Because if you don't exist, I cannot kill you. And if you don't exist, I also cannot lie to you, nor do I exist, so I wouldn't be the liar. But I perceive myself as an actor in this world, who has responsibility. So how would you say, can I harmonize these problems?
Okay, so at this point, you're not 100% understanding the universal truth of non-self, and that's why you're having trouble with it, so I'll help you. So the Buddha is not saying that there isn't a being here. He's not saying that there isn't a being in existence, because there's a being in existence. There's a body and there's a mind. These are the two things. And then these two things coming together, the Buddha describes this as the person, right? So these three components, there's the body, there's the mind, and the combination of the two is the person. And it's the mind that's making all these decisions, and it's using the body as a way of executing those decisions. So you're talking about killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and things like this. All of that is coming from the mind, and it's using the body in some cases to execute these kinds of things. So there is a being in existence that's doing these kinds of things, but the Buddhist sharing with you that that's not you or who you are as a person. So for example, say I used drugs and alcohol in the past. I made unwise decisions to do those things, and I did some harmful things in the past. But those things don't define who I am as a person. It's not me. It's not who I am. So these are just decisions that were made, but it doesn't define who I am as a person. So the universal truth of non-self is explaining to you not to cling or not to hold on to this body or this mind as who you are. In more detail, the Buddha is explaining to you not to cling to what's called the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates are the form, the feelings, the perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world, your choices and decisions, which are volitional formations, and then the consciousness itself, the mind. The Buddha essentially is sharing with you that none of these things are you and who you are. But the challenge in the unenlightened mind with this personal existence view is the mind's going to keep grasping for something. It's going to say, well, if I'm not this body and I'm not this mind, then what am I? And the Buddha's not saying that you don't exist. He's just saying don't cling to these things as who you are and define who you are as a person through these 5 aggregates of form, feelings, your perceptions and views and opinions, your choices and decisions or volitional formations, and your consciousness or the mind itself. Because we've been taught all through our life to identify with these things. We've been given a label, like my label was David. And we're born in a certain country, so we say, I am American, or I think maybe you're German, or I am German, right? You know, that our country gives us a flag and a national anthem and all these things to identify with as who we are as a person. And you can get to the point where you understand that these things don't define this being. But that's not to say there isn't a being in existence, because there is a being in existence, but none of these forms, feelings, your perceptions, your choices or decisions, your consciousness define who you are as a person. These are just fleeting things. These are just impermanent things.
May I still ask, isn't it true, like when for example, someone asks, who did it? That I say, it was I who did it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's a very meaningful saying that I say, I was the one who did it. Mm-hmm. And similarly, I don't know, like, for example, I could say I'm a Buddhist without clinging to it. I mean, the non-clinging part I do understand. But on the other hand, before you said, whenever you say, tell yourself, I am X, Y, Z, mm-hmm. that leads to suffering or something along the line. Yeah. But how can I say? It seems to me like a very, very meaningful sentence, like, for example, to say, I'm not a Nazi, or even I live in Thailand, or whatever. It's a statement about a very simple truth. Mm-hmm. Isn't it?
So this is one of the challenges with personal existence view, and one of the reasons why it stays intact and it's so hard for people to get rid of it is because the language that we use is really unfitting to really represent what we're truly experiencing. That we oftentimes speak in ways that doesn't represent true reality. In this language that we're using right now, English, we will say, I am angry, or I am thirsty, right? And we use this I am because this language that's how we use it. But in the Thai language, if you speak Thai, you will usually speak in the third person. You will say David is hungry, or David is thirsty. So one of the things that you'll hear me share when we talk about eliminating personal existence view is you need to start disassociating with this phrase I am. So rather than your mind thinking I am hungry or I am thirsty, you need to think of the body needs food, or the head hurts. Instead of I have a headache, you need to think the head hurts. Or instead of I am angry, you need to be thinking of the mind is angry, or the mind is experiencing anger. So we use these words in the English language of I am angry, but in reality there is no I there to be angry. But because our language is unfitting to really describe what we're experiencing, this personal existence view stays intact because the mind hasn't learned to think of this existence and what you're experiencing through true reality. So to be able to see true reality, that really what is truly here is a bunch of tissue and bones and fluid and all of this stuff, and this isn't me. Now, if you can learn slowly, when we get to that chapter or that class, I will help you to be able to see how to disassociate with this I am. And you're going to need to start training your mind to disassociate with this. And ultimately, you might go a period of 6 months or a year where you choose to not use this phrase I am, like even within your own mind, that you might think of, instead of I am going home, you might think of this being is going home. Or instead of I am hungry, this body needs food. So for about 6 months or a year, you might start to disassociate with these kinds of things. But then at some point, it just makes it easier to communicate that says, I am going home, right? And you might be saying this to your friend or your family member, but your mind understands that there's no I here by that point because you've realized non-self. So you're going to need to modify the way that your mind thinks. And oftentimes the way the mind thinks is based on the language that you use, not only externally, but internally too. So this is part of learning how to disassociate with this body as being who you are, is to change your inner dialogue and change the way that you talk through 6 months or a year of this type of training. Then you can get to the point where you can clearly see that this body isn't you and this mind isn't you. And that takes time to peel that away.
And what about responsibility? That is something I find quite important. Like, responsibility is closely connected to the course of action, and the course of action is I, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the one who did something, and I have to take responsibility for it.
Yeah,
or is that absence in this teaching of non-self?
So responsibility is wise decision making, right? So this being, it needs to take care of the young child that I brought into the world. This child, this son, I am needing to make wise decisions to help him grow and develop. But it's this being, this mind, that is doing that, right? So when we talk about that there's no I here, you can be wise and you can be responsible to the people around you without clinging to this body or without clinging to the mind, thinking that this is who you are. So you don't need to cling to the body or cling to the mind in order to make wise decisions, to be responsible for certain roles or certain tasks or activities that you're doing in the world. Right now, your mind doesn't know how to do that. And that's what you need to learn how to do. So when we get to that portion of the course, you'll be able to learn how to do that. If you cling to what you're currently thinking about this topic, you won't be able to see the truth in it. But by the time you penetrate into understanding personal existence view and how to strip this away, and you do the work to strip it away, then you'll be able to understand how you can exist in the world, being responsible, making wise decisions, but still not clinging to this body or this mind. These are two separate things. Being responsible and making wise decisions is one thing. Not clinging to this body and not clinging to the mind is completely separate. But you're right now mixing that up, seeing it as one thing. And this is part of the confusion or the misunderstanding in the mind. So you're going to need to do the work to clear that up in your mind. And as you think about this and as you talk about it and as you have discussions, that's what will help you to be able to do it. Because realizing non-self, it's not something you're going to do in one conversation or maybe even one class. Oftentimes, students that have been studying with me, it sometimes takes them a year and a half, 2 years to fully get to the point where they understand the personal existence view, they understand the universal truth of non-self, then they implement it in practice and actually start to realize non-self. It can take up to a year, 2 years even for people to do that. So this is just one conversation of probably many that you're going to need to have in order to understand it and actually realize non-self.
2 small questions. First, you talked about the animal realm, that from the animal realm it comes with the putting oneself above or below. Mm-hmm. What about the other realms? If someone came from one of the other realms, is it different? These people don't have this much ego or have a different...
Let's talk about that when we get to either the topic of ego or the animal realm and human realm rather than here. Are you okay to hold that question until then?
Okay, then I also just interested about, for example, narcissistic people.
Did you say autistic?
Narcissistic.
Okay, yeah. This is more about the ego.
Okay. These people come from the animal realm, and is there a special category of animals you can say these people come from that, like lions or?
If we can hold off on that until we get to that point, because I'd like to be sure that we can learn this before we explore those kinds of things. Okay, see if we have any other questions anywhere. Oh, you have a question? Yes, ma'am.
I know that I'm not defined by external things such as the expensive clothes and the stuff I use and skin and appearance. So I don't know what's the meaning of striving for money and social status and beauty. What's more, when I think more about this, I don't know what's the meaning of living and life, because I know that most of the things in the world are not important. I just need to focus a little things that in my heart. So I don't know why people and I will pursue these external things automatically.
That's what you're going to understand this afternoon when we talk about the 3 poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance. That's why people are pursuing these kinds of things. And this is also one of the benefits of realizing non-self, is that you realize that you don't have to wear that $300 shirt in order to go out in the world and interact in the world. And you don't need that gold necklace to do this thing or that thing. Because when we are chasing after those things, we'll work extensively to be able to acquire enough income to buy that diamond ring or those diamond earrings or those clothing or what have you. So when you realize non-self, that these things don't define who you are, not only do you get more peaceful because you're not being affected by the agreeable or disagreeable contact that you're having, but also you're not chasing after these things to decorate this body. And this can bring a lot of peace because you're not having to work so hard. So there's times where, as you're starting to strip away these cravings, where the mind is so used to craving and chasing after things, that you get to the point where it sounds like you might be thinking right now, where like life is pointless, it's meaningless. Like, what is there really here to do? And this is where you can start to see that the ego is stripping away, the personal existence view is stripping away, and you're starting to see that, yeah, this is just all kind of pointless. So let's use that as motivation to get out of this cycle of rebirth, so you don't just keep coming back over and over and over again. But ultimately, your mind will move through this and past this, where it will brighten up more, and you can see the enjoyment of life, that there is enjoyment here. But learning how to enjoy life without getting conditioned feelings is part of the path to enlightenment. That oftentimes we don't know how to do that in the unenlightened state, that we cling to things and we can only be happy based on these external things. But you're going to need to learn how to strip all that away and train the mind to be joyful and happy in an unconditioned sense, and having unconditioned mental qualities versus conditioned feelings. So this afternoon, when we talk about the 3 poisons, that's what will help you to understand why people chase after these things, or why you might have chased after these things at different times in your life.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so now there's one more thing to talk about before we peer into the Four Noble Truths, which is understanding craving, desire, attachment. This is a mental aspect that each unenlightened mind has, which is this mental longing and strong eagerness, this chasing after things. This is essentially why people chase after expensive clothes and things like this, is because of craving, desire, attachment. The mind is longing, yearning. It thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases. It's like an unquenchable thirst, that the mind just thinks that this thing is going to provide me lasting satisfaction, whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whether it's more money or jewelry or a new car. The mind just chases after these things. So if you've ever been in the mall and you saw a brand new pair of shoes and you're just like, oh, brand new pair of shoes, yes, 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 or brand new phone, brand new computer, brand new video game, a new tattoo, a new Kindle, a new hat, a new car, a new this. The mind just chases and chases and chases after these things. Like, if I can just get that thing, everything will be perfect in my life, right? This is what the mind has in the unenlightened state, is this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, yearning. And you can have these things. You can have a phone, you can have relationships, you can have possessions, but you need to learn how to do that without craving, desire, attachment. But this craving, desire, attachment, this wants, these expectations, this longing and yearning, this is what's essentially causing the discontent feelings. And that's what you're going to see here in the Four Noble Truths. Now, normally I walk through this very slowly with students when they're first starting out, but here I'm just going to kind of talk about it from a high level. But for those of you guys that haven't studied this with me before, if you guys would like to penetrate into any of this in more detail, just let me know. So the first Noble Truth is explaining the problem, that the problem in the unenlightened state is that the mind's experiencing discontentedness. This is the up and down and up and down and up and down of the mind. The mind's experiencing pleasant feelings, so happy, so excited, but then it drops off into the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. This is the problem that the Buddha discovered. Then the second Noble Truth is explaining the cause. The cause is the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way, so that the mind gets its cravings fulfilled. If it gets its wants and expectations fulfilled, it'll feel happy or excited. It'll get pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, if those cravings are unfulfilled, it will experience painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. This is the up and down. It's being caused by the craving, desire, attachment. So the first Noble Truth is explaining the problem. The second Noble Truth is explaining the cause of that problem. And you can independently verify this for yourself by looking at certain situations where you've recently been angry or frustrated or even excited or elated. And you can see that there's some craving in your mind that either got fulfilled, so you got pleasant feelings, or it didn't get fulfilled, so you got angry or frustrated or sad. If you can think about a time when you've been with a boyfriend or girlfriend, when you guys first got together, you were so happy, so excited, so elated that this brand new person was in your life. But then over time, the relationship ended, and then you got angry or sad, or you felt lonely, or you felt bored. This is because the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting things to be permanent. When you live in an impermanent world, the mind is confused. It has this pollution. It has this craving, wanting things to be permanent. It doesn't understand that it lives in an impermanent world. So it just keeps craving permanence. This is where when someone dies, for example, your mind grieves or you feel sorrow. The reason why is because you're craving for that person to be permanent, when in reality they are impermanent. Or any number of other examples. You can ask me questions if you like. What the Buddha is essentially sharing with you in the second Noble Truth is that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings. When you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're feeling guilty or shameful or stress or anxiety, this is coming from inside your own mind. And it's being caused by the mind craving permanence. And you can independently verify this, and you need to independently verify it for yourself in order to be able to see the truth here. So if you're having trouble seeing that, let me know. You can tell me an example, and I will help you to be able to see how your mind's causing this itself. Then the third Noble Truth is explaining the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. If you can train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, then you can eliminate all your discontentedness. Because the mind is causing its own discontentedness, this is why you can train your mind to eliminate it. If it was everyone else that was causing you to be angry, then you can't train your mind. You can't eliminate it, because everyone else is causing it. But if you can understand through the Four Noble Truths that your mind is causing these discontent feelings, this empowers you, because now if you understand that you're causing these, that the craving, desire, attachment is causing this, now you can understand that it's possible to eliminate it. And the way that you do that is described in the Fourth Noble Truth. The way that you eliminate it is through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the complete perfect plan that is explaining to you how to eliminate your discontentedness. There's 8 individual steps, 8 individual factors that you learn and you grow and you develop. And this is what's going to ultimately eliminate your discontentedness. But it all starts with right view. What right view is understanding that your mind is causing your own discontentedness. What wrong view would be is to blame your discontentedness on somebody else. If you have wrong view, which all people have when they come to the path to enlightenment, you'd never be able to solve your problem. What you'll do with wrong view is when you get angry or frustrated, you will push people away out of your life, or you'll push the situation out of the way, and you'll think that you've solved the problem. Because when you feel angry and you're uncomfortable with those feelings, you'll push people out of your life thinking that that solves the problem. But it doesn't, because the problem still exists. The problem is the anger, the sadness, the frustration. You keep experiencing that problem over and over and over again because that person wasn't the problem. Maybe they did something unwise, but the reason why you got angry is because of your own cravings. So as long as you push people away, you're not going to be able to solve the problem. But the reason why the mind is pushing people away is because it misunderstands. It doesn't have the wisdom to understand right view. It has wrong view. Or the second thing you'll do when you misunderstand the problem and you lack wisdom is you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile and angry at people. And you might be aggressive with them through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is almost like an animal trying to fear other beings into doing things your way. It's like showing your teeth and growling and roaring at somebody, trying to fear them to do things your way. The mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled, and it thinks the way to do that is to scare other people to do things your way. This is why the mind growls and roars and yells and hollers at people. But then a third thing that the mind can do when it lacks wisdom is it can try to force people and control people through putting your expectations on people, pressuring people to do things your way. And this is because the mind doesn't understand what the true problem is. It thinks that this anger, this frustration is being caused by something external. So it tries to force this person to do things your way. Again, the mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled. It's trying to get its longing and yearning fulfilled. And it thinks if I can just get everybody to do things my way, the world would be perfect. But the only problem with this perspective is that there's 8 billion people in the world and you can't train them all to do things your way. So with right view, you can see the truth, that your mind is causing these feelings itself, and now it's a matter of training it in order to produce the peacefulness and the joy. And that's what the rest of the Eightfold Path is there for, is to help you completely train the mind. Okay? So next is right intention. Right intention will take me a very short time to explain it to you. Right view takes a long time to explain and help you to understand, but right intention is very straightforward. There's 3 aspects to it. There's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. Some people translate this as right thinking or right thought, because that's essentially what this is all about. It's having the thinking or the thought or the intention of renunciation, which is the willingness to let go and give up of your unwholesomeness, right? One of the things you need to let go of is your false beliefs, your opinions, your views. You're going to have certain opinions or views, but you're going to actually know the truth by the time you get to enlightenment. But right now, there might be certain opinions or views that you're holding on to and you're clinging to that are actually false opinions and false beliefs or false views. And when you cling to these and hold on to them, your mind can't get to enlightenment because your mind's locked and it's not open to learning something new. So if you don't practice the intention of renunciation, where you're willing to let go of your false beliefs and your opinions and your views, then you can't get to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha makes this the second step, that you would never be able to learn right speech, right action, right livelihood, and all this other stuff if you didn't practice the intention of renunciation. One of the very first beliefs that you need to eliminate is the belief that other people are causing you to be angry. Oftentimes, this is a false belief that people are coming to the path to enlightenment with. I know I did, right? You were in arguments. You've been in arguments where you firmly believe that other people are making you angry, and you've been adamantly trying to convince them to stop doing what they're doing because they're making me angry, and this is wrong, and you shouldn't be doing this. In reality, your mind was causing this anger itself. They still could have been doing something that's unwise, but that's not what was causing your anger. So if you didn't practice the intention of renunciation, you don't have an open mind. You're not willing to learn something new. So by practicing the intention of renunciation, you're willing to let go of the unwholesomeness and the lack of wisdom and the false beliefs and opinions and views that are in the mind. Then the intention of non-ill will. Ill will is like the bitterness, the hostility, the anger, the aggression. That's what ill will is. And you need to be able to practice the intention of non-ill will, which is essentially saying the intention of loving kindness. That's the opposite of ill will. So non-ill will is a double negative. So this is the same as saying practicing good will. You need to have the intention of goodwill. Because as long as you have ill will towards others, it's going to come out through your intention, speech, and actions. And now when you're practicing your ill will, that's all going to come back to you. So how could you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you're putting out all this ill will and it's just coming back to you? Because your friends and family or your neighbors, your coworkers are all being hateful and vindictive to you because that's the way you're being with them, right? So you need to practice the intention or the thinking or the thought of non-ill will or goodwill or loving kindness. And then also the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. And you're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and be able to implement these things that I'm talking about here. You're going to need to dial this in closer and closer, where you practice harmlessness, because as long as you're harming others, harm is going to come back to you. So you're going to need to have that intention of renunciation, where you're having an open mind and having this willingness to learn and grow and develop, and this intention of non-ill will, and this intention of harmlessness. So just kind of summarizing the first two steps of the Eightfold Path, right view is accepting responsibility for your own feelings, your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is understanding that, yes, what you're experiencing in terms of your mind and in terms of your life is a responsibility that you have, that you're making decisions that are leading to any particular result. It's not other people that are causing the challenges that you're experiencing in your life. So when you can accept responsibility and accountability for what you're experiencing in your own mind, now you can fix it. But if it's everybody else that is causing these things, this is where you wouldn't be able to solve it, because it's everyone else that is the problem. So when you're learning this path, I don't encourage you to think about it as fault or blame. Sometimes people think like it's my fault that I'm experiencing these things. I don't suggest you think of it this way, because this is kind of a degrading, diminishing way of thinking, and you might feel guilty and shameful. Instead, just understand that there's a lack of wisdom in the mind. There's certain pollutions that are in the mind that are hindering the mind from experiencing the peace and the joy and the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind. And what the Buddha is teaching you in right view is just helping you understand that, hey, you need to take responsibility for this. But don't allow that to become guilt or shame or anything like this, because every being that was ever born was unenlightened. Every single one, including the Buddha. When he was born, he was unenlightened, right? So you don't have to feel guilty or shameful about this, but just accept and understand and see with your own eyes true reality that the mind is causing these feelings itself. And then right intention is what we just described. The intention of renunciation, living with an open mind, willingness to let go, the intention of non-ill will or goodwill, loving kindness, and the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested and incapable of causing harm to other beings. And when we talk about causing harm, what I mean here is physical harm, harm to someone's material possessions, or harm to their reputation. You can't cause other people to be discontent, but you can harm them. You can harm them physically, you can harm their material possessions, or you can harm them in their reputation. And whenever you're causing harm to someone physically, their material possessions, or their reputation, this is going to all come back to you. So you can't cause others to be discontent. They may not understand that, but you can't. But you can cause them harm. Harm and discontentedness are two different things. So any questions on these first two steps of the Eightfold Path? Okay, not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our first break. It's 10:45. Let's come back at 11, and I'm going to pick it up with the moral conduct and the mental discipline section. Give you guys a nice 15-minute break, okay? So thank you for your questions. Thank you for the discussion, and I'll see you guys after break, okay? Okay, so welcome back from your break. I'm going to continue on sharing the Eightfold Path with you guys. And again, I'm going to be doing this from kind of like a higher level, even though in other classes I go much deeper into it. But at any point that you guys would like to go deeper, just let me know, because I know all of you guys haven't studied with me on this topic. So I'm open to going deeper. Just let me know what it is that you guys would like to discuss if you have anything you'd like to discuss more deeply. So now we're going into this moral conduct section of right speech, right action, right livelihood. And this is where you're learning the wisdom of the natural law of karma. This is the cause and effect. The Buddha is explaining to you the moral conduct that you could potentially do that would be harmful. And then he's explaining to you the harmless moral conduct, because as long as you're putting out harm, this harm is going to come back. So don't ever view this moral conduct as rules or commandments or anything like that, or that he's even trying to convince you to do anything, because his mind's already peaceful. If your mind decides to continue to do these things, that's your choice, but you're going to experience the results of that, and you can understand why through this moral conduct. So here in right speech, which we might consider to be right communication, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was only speech, but nowadays we have text messages, we have social media, we have emails, we have all kinds of ways of communicating. You would like all your communication, no matter what it is, to be practicing right speech or right communication, where you eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And you can independently verify that these are unwise, because we've all lied. And when we lied, did it produce wholesome results or did it produce unwholesome results? You can see that it produced unwholesome results. And that's what the Buddha is showing you, is this natural law of karma, of cause and effect, of what is wise and unwise. Same thing with slander or gossip, where we're damaging someone's reputation. If you've ever done those kinds of things, you probably noticed people gossip and slandered about you. Right? As soon as your back was turned, that's what exactly was what happened, because that's what you put out and that's what's coming back to you. This is why people that are in investigative reporting, when they get on the news and they talk about somebody, even though, we have news where people talk about what one person has done versus another, you can see people get injured, people get beat up, people even get murdered for going out and slandering and gossiping. The teachings of the Buddha aren't telling you the way the world should be. He's not telling you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And if you gossip and slander people, they're going to want to injure you because you've damaged their reputation. No matter whether it's true or whether it's false, they're going to be interested in harming you because this is harming them. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you to avoid this and to refrain from doing this, because at the very least, people are going to be gossiping and slandering you. Harsh speech is all about your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. You would like to get this to the point where you're speaking in gentle ways, because if your tone, tempo, and word choice is harsh and bitter and hostile, and that's what you're putting out, that's the way people are going to talk with you. So if you like it when people speak with you gently and warmly and lovingly and kindly and respectfully, you're going to need to speak that way too, so that your children, your parents, your siblings, your coworkers, your neighbors, all these people get used to you speaking in that way, and they'll speak to you in the same way. It's not going to be instantaneous, particularly if you've been bitter and harsh and hostile in the past, but over time, a year, 2, 3, I think you guys have heard examples where it took me a good year and a half to get my relationship with my wife to the point where now we are never bitter and harsh and hostile with each other. We're only loving and kind and warm and gentle with each other, because I had to extinguish my unwholesome karma from the past. So if you transform your mind where you're now not speaking harsh anymore, it's going to take time for you to extinguish your unwise decisions from the past. And then frivolous speech, what this is also referred to as idle chatter. This is like unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech. There's a craving in there where the mind is just yada, 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 yada. It's just pointless talk, right? So what all 4 of these are doing is it's helping you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, because remember, the Eightfold Path is the path to eliminating craving, desire, attachment. Because when you're lying, there's a certain craving there. The mind wants something. And if I tell the truth, I'm not going to get what I want. So the mind lies in order to try to get what it wants. There's an underlying craving there. So by speaking the truth, you're training the mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. The same thing with slander. When someone's slandering, they're usually trying to diminish and degrade other people in order to look good yourself. There's a craving there coming from the ego, right? The mind wants to look good, and the mind thinks that if I put out somebody else's candle, then my candle will burn brighter. But in reality, when you put out someone's candle, the whole room gets darker. right? So you're not interested in slandering because there's an underlying craving there. Same thing with harsh speech. Whenever you're speaking harshly and aggressively, there's a craving there that's being triggered. And the same thing with frivolous speech. There's a craving to just talk and talk and talk and talk. So this is helping you to extinguish craving, desire, attachment, getting to more peace and more joy, but it's also helping you improve your moral conduct. So what you experience coming back to you is more wholesome. But then there's another teaching that goes deeper, because remember, the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that all the other teachings plug into. There's this teaching called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. This is ultimately what you would like to dial into your life closer and closer, where you're speaking at the right time, what you say is true, it's beneficial, it's with a mind of loving kindness. I think I missed gentle. Proper time, true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. These are the 5 factors. And you can go in and penetrate into these and be able to see very clearly that when you've used these 5 factors of well-spoken speech, your conversation went really well, but you didn't necessarily consciously know that you were using these 5 factors. But then also in conversations that didn't go well, if you've had any of those recently, or maybe in the last month or two, look back at it. You'll see that you weren't practicing one or more of these factors. Speaking at the proper time would be to make sure that you're not interrupting people, making sure that your mind is not angry and agitated and annoyed, making sure your mind's peaceful, and then also making sure it's the proper time for the other person as well. Speaking the truth is being a truth speaker, not talking about conspiracy theories and unfounded truths and just things that you believe. Instead, speak the truth of what you know to be true, which you've experienced through your own direct experience. Again, gentle speech is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Speaking beneficially is having purposeful, clear, precise, and concise speech. Whereas if you're rambling with rambling chit-chat, people are having to do a lot of work to listen to you. And you'll find that you won't be very influential in your relationships because people are struggling so hard to be able to understand you. So you'd like to speak purposefully and clearly and concisely in your conversations, whether they're personal or professional. With a mind of loving kindness is ensuring that you're not speaking with inner hate or ill will, right? So you could use all 5 of these factors and you'll see that your conversations will go really well because you've had those kinds of conversations before. But you can also see in conversations that didn't go well for you, you and or the other person weren't practicing at least one of these. And this is where, even though in the past you were practicing these when you experienced wholesome conversations, without knowing it. Now, when you understand these natural laws and you understand how to speak, you can consciously start speaking this way. But when you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you'll find it challenging to do this. What you're doing here is you're developing barami. Barami is a Thai word, which means the one who people listen to. You would like to develop this so that you can be influential and beneficial in your community. So when you're practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you're not causing harm to others through your speech. And more your relationships will become harmonious. You'll see that your mind will become more clear in terms of getting to the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. That if you're speaking and rambling chit-chat and you're not very purposeful in your speech, your mind's going to be cluttered. The Buddha refers to it as muddle-mindedness, that your mind is going to be muddled. So you'd like to be very clear and concise using these types of qualities as you're speaking or even communicating with social media or text messages or anything like this. Okay? There's a lot of details on the right speech in the book that you can learn there, and I've taught this in detail in other places as well. So you're going to need to really improve your speech if you're having difficulties with this in any of your relationships where you're speaking wisely in all your conversations. And it's going to be work to be able to do that. You can't just snap your fingers and instantly do it. Okay. And then the Buddha teaches right action, which is not causing harm through your bodily actions. If you're causing harm through your bodily actions, this harm is going to come back to you. So here he's teaching 3 impactful bodily actions that could cause harm, like killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. When you study the 5 precepts, which I teach in other programs, the Buddha explores this and expands this and helps you to be able to see this more clearly, because things like sexual misconduct, that doesn't give you enough information to be able to practice this. But in the 5 precepts, he explains what sexual misconduct is. So the Eightfold Path is that core central teaching where others plug into it. So if you haven't studied the 5 precepts using the original words of the Buddha, the way that I teach it, you're going to need to explore that either through the books, the audiobooks, the classes, the courses. Because if you've been taught that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, you haven't learned the 5 precepts yet. The Buddha describes these things in much more detail, are not the way that the Buddha taught. This sounds like black and white or rules and commandments. You're going to need to explore this in more detail to be able to fully understand. So what the Buddha is teaching you here is don't cause harm with your body. So if you were dragging your suitcase through the aisle of the plane, running over people's feet and bumping into their knees, you're going to have problems. People are going to get disgruntled and angry and irritated. So while the Buddha is teaching you how to not cause harm to others and how to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state, he's also teaching you how to navigate a world with a bunch of unenlightened beings. Because if you ran over my foot with a suitcase, I wouldn't be upset, right? I would just smile and be like, oh, no worries, no big deal. And maybe you would do that too. But other people aren't going to necessarily function that way. They're going to be disgruntled. They're going to be agitated. They're going to be annoyed because they're craving to have things done a certain way in the world. And when you bump into them or you do something with the body that's causing injury or harm, they're going to be angry and discontent. And they don't have right view. They think you're the one who's causing them to be angry. And this is where they might lash out at you. So the Buddha is teaching you how to protect your own mind through training your mind, but he's also teaching you how to navigate the world with a bunch of unenlightened beings. So if you can train your mind not to cause harm through the body, you're not causing harm to other beings, so harm isn't coming back to you. So you're going to need to explore these in more detail because the Buddha is not giving you an exhaustive list of everything you could do in order to cause harm with the body, because planes didn't even exist during his lifetime. So he can't give you an exhaustive list. But if you understand what right action is, then you can understand to not cause harm through your bodily actions. And there's all kinds of ways that you could cause harm, but you need to look at that as you're going through the world, that you're not causing harm to someone physically, their material possessions, or their reputation, because that's the harm that's going to then come back to you. Then there's right livelihood. What right livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life. This is the way that you acquire a certain income and acquire the basic needs in order to sustain your life. And the Buddha is teaching you to sustain your life through a way that doesn't cause harm to others. So he gives you these 5 livelihoods that would cause harm, like business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And you can independently verify each of these. If you've ever done these or you've seen other people do them, you can see where it causes harm and it comes back to you. Like, for example, business and weapons. If you've seen in places in the world where people who are building nuclear bombs, there's people from other countries where those nuclear bombs are going to potentially be used, and those people assassinate the scientists who are developing the nuclear bombs. So you can see each one of these, whether it's the living beings or meats or substances that cause heedlessness or poisons. Remember, the Buddha is not explaining the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And if you do these things, it's causing harm. So therefore, harm is going to come back to you. So I usually go through some of these and teach it to you. But if you have questions, you guys can let me know and we can explore this further. But these are 5 livelihoods that the Buddha is teaching you that would cause harm. Then he teaches you how to perform your livelihood, that if you're performing your livelihood with scheming, which is like corruption, if you're flattering people, which is like insincere comments just to get people to buy things from you, if you are hinting, which is like being unclear and imprecise about the way that you're talking in your job, the way you're communicating. Belittling is like degrading or diminishing your coworkers or your business partners or your customers or your competition. Pursuing gain with gain is like just collecting a paycheck. You don't really care about the work that you're doing, that you're just collecting a paycheck. You're just doing it for the money. The Buddha is teaching you that it would be unwise to do these things because you're not going to be successful in your livelihood. So if I was a doctor, for example, or if I was a politician or a police officer, that's not causing harm to do those particular jobs. But if I was scheming or if I was corrupt, this is causing harm. So the Buddha is teaching you how to sustain your livelihood where you can, for a long term, be able to sustain your life through any particular livelihood that you develop or that you choose to participate in. This is what we call the first fold of purification, where you eliminate those 5 livelihoods and you eliminate these things as part of your livelihood. This is the first fold of purification. There's a second fold of purification of your livelihood where you're eliminating any kind of decisions that you're making about your livelihood based in the 10 fetters, any of the pollutions, the 3 poisons, any of these kinds of things. And this is a deeper level teaching that is in volume 12, chapter 14, that you need to eliminate any kind of pollution in the mind, any of the fetters in terms of the way that you're conducting your livelihood and performing your livelihood. Because as long as any of those pollutions are involved in practicing your livelihood, it's going to produce difficulties and struggles in your livelihood. Essentially, what the Buddha is helping you get to is to a point where whatever livelihood that you've chosen and however you choose to sustain your life, that you thoroughly enjoy what you're doing, that you're enthusiastic, that you have ambition and motivation in the work that you're doing. Whereas if you hate going to work, if you drag yourself to work each day and you despise going to that place, you're not going to get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. So you need to be consciously choosing what type of livelihood am I going to choose? And then once I'm in that livelihood, performing it in a way that is going to promote success. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, because then your life can be at ease because you're doing something you enjoy 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day. Whereas if you don't like what you do for that period of time, you're not going to be able to get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. Or if you conduct your livelihood with any of these things, you're not going to be successful in that livelihood, and you're going to find that it's a struggle in order to sustain your life. So he's helping you to figure out how to sustain your life in an enjoyable and enthusiastic and a way that you can be motivated and encouraged in the work that you do from day to day. So this is just an overview of the moral conduct, but you're going to need to penetrate into this really deeply, because when the Buddha would teach his students right view, the very next thing he would teach them would be moral conduct. Because as long as you're trying to get to enlightenment, since a lot of you guys just studied the natural law of karma with me yesterday, is if you're trying to get to enlightenment and you're extinguishing your unwholesome karma, that's what your goal is. If you're continuing to have moral conduct where you're causing harm, that's just more and more harm that you're going to have to deal with. So as soon as you establish right view and you understand that your mind is causing your own discontentedness, the very next thing that you would like to work on and improve is your moral conduct. You would like to shut down any harm that you're causing through your moral conduct, because that's all harm that you're going to have to deal with as it's coming back to you. So the Buddha would focus on moral conduct as the very next thing that he would teach you after you establish right view, so that you can shut down any kind of harm that you're causing to others. So just summarizing this, right speech is not causing harm through any of your verbal conduct. But remember, we have all kinds of communication nowadays. Verbal, text, chat, post, emails, all of this should be harmless. Because if you went into a job interview and you really did a great job at the job interview, but they looked at your social media, if you're being harsh and bitter and hostile there, you're probably not going to get the job. No matter how well you did at the interview, you're going to have difficulties when they look at your social media. So you would like all your communication and all platforms, all venues to be using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Then ensure that you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. And then the same thing with your livelihood, is sustaining your life through a way that you feel enthusiastic and motivated and encouraged. And you might not have that right now. You might be in between jobs. You might not even be employed right now, and that's okay. But when you choose to actually move out into the world and have a livelihood, be sure you select something that you feel good about and you can be encouraged and motivated, because then you're going to enjoy life much, much more that way. Okay, any questions on the moral conduct? You have a question? Yeah, go ahead. Most of these people have all studied this before, so feel free.
Question is about right speech. Mm-hmm. What about pulling one's leg? About, like, for example, I'm in a chess club, there's a lot of what we call trash talk, or fooling someone in a loving way. You know, I'm not talking of belittling someone, but in a loving way, banter also. Or let's say I go down in the elevator in my condominium. In this 1 minute I meet somebody, it's a very superficial speech. And I seem to understand that this should be excluded from my speech. What about these things?
Okay, so we'll talk about these two separately. So the bantering and the digging on each other at your chess club, I would encourage you not to do this. And I know that the people there probably feel that is fun and that's enjoyable, but you're going to offend somebody through doing that. There's going to be somebody that gets offended, and somebody's going to get angry, and somebody's going to get frustrated, and now you've got a problem to deal with. So we have game night here, where every 2 weeks we have a Friday that we come together at 6 p.m. and we play games, and people are winning and people are losing, but we're all having fun and we're not trash talking each other. We're just having fun and we're just enjoying it. So you can enjoy these kinds of things, but as long as you're like digging on people and you're degrading and diminishing people, this is going to cause difficulties in your life, and you're going to experience this coming back to you. So if you're interested in getting to a point where your life is peaceful and joyful and harmonious, you're going to need to be able to improve that part of your practice. But whether you choose to do that or not, it's your choice. For me, when I play games, I just play games. And even when somebody beats me, I will give them a high five. I'll be like, hey, good job. Awesome. Great job, right? No need to be bitter and harsh and hostile just because the game was lost. The fun in playing games is the experience of spending time together and enjoying time together, not the winning or losing or the bantering at each other. But I realize that in playing games that a lot of people will do those kinds of things. It's just unwise, in my opinion, and it wouldn't be right speech to be able to do those things. But that's a part of your practice that you might need to decide whether or not you're going to clean it up or not. In terms of the other one about talking in the elevator, this isn't wrong speech. Remember that when we talk about the beneficial speech, it's not about the topic that you're talking about. It's about the method of delivery, that you're clear and concise and precise. So if I was in the elevator and I'm going down with somebody that I haven't met, I'd be like, hi, how are you? They're like, oh, hi, where are you from? What are you up to? Where are you going? Or whatever you're doing, whatever that small talk is that we call it, right? This is purposeful. This is beneficial because you're building a relationship with this person. So it's not about the topic that you're discussing. It's not like there's an approved list of topics to discuss. What speaking beneficially is making sure you're clear and concise and purposeful in your speech. So even when you first meet people, it's going to be like, hi, where are you from? How old are you? What do you do? These are very purposeful in the way that you're speaking. So that kind of discussion in the elevator, that's fine. There's no harm in that kind of speech. It would be if you were just rattling when somebody got into the elevator and it was like, let me tell you everything about me. You're broadcasting. It's not really a conversation. You're broadcasting. That would be unbeneficial because now you're having frivolous speech and pointless speech or rambling chit chat. So when you're talking, you can be purposeful and beneficial even when you're having small talk and just getting to know this person, because the benefit is you're building a relationship. All right, so now let's move on to the mental discipline section, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is where you're going to learn how to really fine-tune the mind, and this is important in order to be able to get to the jhanas, because it's the mental discipline that's going to really propel you into the jhanas. You wouldn't be able to get to the jhanas if you had really harmful moral conduct. You are going to need to clean up your moral conduct in order to get into the jhanas, but you're really going to need to look at your mental discipline in order to get into the jhanas. So now this is right effort. And usually I read this to be able to help you guys to understand what the Buddha is sharing about right effort, but I've done that in other programs. You guys can read this if you haven't read it before. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach this to you because the Buddha is talking about 4 aspects of right effort here. What he's talking about is applying the effort to prevent unwholesome mental states from coming into the mind. He's also teaching you to eliminate or abandon any unwholesome mental states that are currently in the mind. He's also teaching you to produce or apply the effort to arise unarisen wholesome mental states. And then he's teaching you to apply the effort to maintain wholesome mental states in the mind, bringing them to full perfection, full growth and development. And I give you examples of this where, like, right now you might not have any interest in killing a human being. If this mental state came into your mind, it would be unwholesome. But that's like the farthest thing from your mind right now. And the Buddha is saying apply the effort to prevent that from ever coming into the mind. And this is just one example. There's other things that are not currently in your mind. And the Buddha is saying apply the effort to prevent those unwholesome mental states from ever coming into the mind. The second one is abandon any unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind. So let's just say you have a relationship and you're in a relationship, but yet you have this craving to go outside your relationship. And you know this is going to cause harm. So when you see that come up in your mind, you eliminate it. You cut it off and eliminate it. Apply the effort to eliminate that from the mind. That's just one example. Or you might have anger or frustration or irritation that comes into the mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate that. It's not just going to naturally be eliminated on its own. You're going to have to apply effort. That's what right effort is all about, is eliminating unwholesome qualities from the mind and preventing unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind. That's the first two aspects of it. But then there's these third and fourth aspect where you're producing unarisen, wholesome mental states to arise in the mind. There's certain wholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now, and you're going to need to apply the effort to bring those into the mind. Generosity might be a good example of that. You're going to need to practice generosity on the path to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without practicing generosity. If the mind was selfish, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So you might find that right now it's hard for you to be generous, and you might need to apply effort to practice that. And there's other wholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now that you're going to need to apply the effort to bring them in. And then the fourth aspect is any wholesome qualities that you currently have in the mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to support those, encourage those, and don't allow them to fade. And I'm just giving some examples here with loving kindness and sympathetic joy. What sympathetic joy is the joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. So it's the opposite of jealousy or envy. So if you notice, like in some situations, that you're quite pleased with other success, like maybe someone gets a new house and it's like, oh, great, I'm really glad for you. That's wonderful. You got a new house, right? This is like sympathetic joy. But now maybe someone goes on a vacation that you really want to go on. Maybe they're going to Africa or something like this, and you really want to go to Africa, but now you're jealous. Right? So you have sympathetic joy in your mind because in some cases you have sympathetic joy, but it hasn't been brought to full growth and full perfection and full development. So you're going to need to apply the effort to arise this sympathetic joy in all situations that is just permeating in the mind. And not just sympathetic joy, but every wholesome mental state. You're going to learn about all different types of wholesome mental states that are going to need to be produced in the mind, and you're going to need to apply the effort to do that. So these are just some examples, but they're going to be unique to you. There's certain unique things that aren't currently in your mind that you're going to need to prevent from coming into your mind. There's certain things that are unique to you that are unwholesome that are currently in your mind that you're going to need to apply the effort to get rid of. There's certain wholesome qualities that are unique to you that aren't currently in your mind that you're going to need to bring into your mind. And there's certain wholesome qualities that are unique to you that are currently in your mind that you're going to need to support and encourage and develop and grow. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's going to be permeating with all these wholesome qualities, and there's going to be no unwholesome qualities in the mind whatsoever. It'll be fully purified. And you'll learn about the wholesome and unwholesome qualities as you're making your way through the teachings of the Buddha. So this is right effort. Then there's right mindfulness. What the Buddha is teaching you here is to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And normally I read this and help you guys to understand what the words of the Buddha are by just reading it, but then I teach it to you. So when I teach you right mindfulness, I teach you that it's awareness of the mind, that you need this general awareness of the mind. And this might be where you start, depending on where you are on your journey, because remember, it's your own independent journey to enlightenment. You might just be gaining this awareness of mind to understand what's going on in your own mind. But then ultimately, you're going to need to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is being aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. When we talk about bodily sensations here, we're not talking just about an itch or a scratch or something like that. What we're talking about is the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness that is arising. that when you have a craving, desire, attachment in your mind, before your mind becomes discontent with a discontent feeling, there's some bodily sensation that's occurring. Maybe there's tingling in the body rising from the feet up to the chest and towards the head. Maybe there's tightening in the chest. Maybe there's a tightening in the throat. Maybe there's heat in the face. Maybe there's pressure in the skull. This would all be associated with things like anger or frustration or irritation. If you're not clued into these right now, you can start cluing into them. You can start building awareness of mind of these things, because this is an early warning system for you that's alerting you that, hey, your mind's about to become discontent. And you have the opportunity at that point to cut it off and let it go. Applying right effort, you could cut it off and let it go. So not only the painful feelings has bodily sensations that are arising, but even the pleasant ones, the conditioned pleasant feelings, like you might notice tingling across your shoulders or up the back of your neck or over your skull, or goosebumps. You ever have goosebumps, right? We call those goosebump things. I don't know if your culture has that, have these little prickly things on your skin. These are the bodily sensations associated with pleasant feelings arising. And the Buddha is cluing you into this because as this human being that you are, you're becoming more and more aware of how this being functions, so that now you can cut off and let go of these bodily sensations, because the mind is trying to form this conditioned feeling. There's some craving in the mind and it's trying to form a conditioned feeling. And if you allow that to happen, the mind's just going to keep firing like that, and it's going to keep forming conditioned feelings. It's sunny outside, so I'm going to be happy. It's raining outside, so I'm going to be sad. Or my bank account balance is this, so I'm going to be happy. My bank account balance is this, so I'm going to be sad. So if you keep allowing those conditioned feelings to happen, then the mind's going to just stay wired that way. But if you can clue into these bodily sensations where it's this early warning system alerting you that this mind is about to get a feeling, then you can take action to cut it off and let it go. Because when you have craving in your mind, when you experience contact through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, the body, or the mind itself, there's going to be this bodily sensation alerting you that, hey, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. The mind's about to get a conditioned feeling. The mind's about to get a conditioned feeling. It's about to get a conditioned feeling. And you have the opportunity to say, nope, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to train you to not do that. Don't get a conditioned feeling, because then you can get to the unconditioned peace and joy. But you can't get to the unconditioned peace and joy and happiness if you keep allowing the mind to form conditioned feelings. So when you notice these bodily sensations occurring, whether it's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, when you see that occurring, you need to apply right effort and say, nope, I'm not going to let you do that. You need to be willing to let go of the temporary happiness in order to get to the permanent happiness or the permanent joy. And the bodily sensations are a big key aspect of being able to do that. When you start being aware of the bodily sensations and you can easily cut it off and let it go there, you're very close to enlightenment. Enlightenment is within the next 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. That right now you may not have awareness of these bodily sensations, or if you have awareness of these bodily sensations, you might not be able to easily cut it off yet, because you haven't accumulated enough of the benefits from your meditation and your generosity to be able to easily cut it off and let it go. But when you can notice those bodily sensations and easily cut it off, enlightenment is very close. It's very nearby. That within the next 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, you're going to be getting to enlightenment. So it's very important to build up this awareness of the bodily sensations. If you miss it as a bodily sensation and you don't cut it off there, cut it off as a feeling. So now the mind is angry. Now the mind's frustrated. Or now the mind's experiencing such excitement and so happy. Yay! This conditioned feeling. Mom's coming to visit. Yay! This is going to be so fun. Where when you notice that, cut that off as a feeling, because you missed it as a bodily sensation, but cut it off as a feeling. Don't allow the mind to dwell. So if you're watching the news and you're noticing, you didn't notice the bodily sensations, but now the mind's frustrated because you're watching the news and you see something that you disagree with. Rather than sit there on the sofa and dwell in that frustration, cut that off and let it go. And that might mean you need to redirect the mind. You need to turn off the TV. You need to get up and go outside for a walk or go for a bike ride or something like this. That's the part of right effort, is not allowing the mind to dwell in those conditioned feelings. If you miss it as a feeling, it's going to start affecting the condition of your mind. Now, for a few hours or a few days, you're going to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed because you didn't catch it as a bodily sensation. You didn't catch it as a feeling. And now for several hours or several days, you're going to be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So you need to have general awareness of how your mind's generally experiencing the world and what feelings are in the mind, but what's the general condition of the mind too. So if you're noticing this irritability or this grumpiness settling in, you need to take action to cut that off. You need to apply right effort to cut that off. And then if you don't do that, if you don't do any of these three, if you don't cut it off at any of those three, it's now going to feed a mental object. What a mental object is a deeply rooted container in the mind, where in this example of frustration and agitation, the mental object would be ill will, where you're now feeding this deeply rooted container in the mind. So what you're trying to do is trying to break that up as well. So having awareness of the mental objects is to learn the 10 fetters, understanding what they are, the symptoms of them, and how they're manifesting, right? And then ultimately what you learn is you learn about the solutions of how to fix those and how to know that they've been eliminated from the mind. So understanding when you're angry and bitter and harsh and hostile to people, understanding that that's coming from the mental object of ill will is to have awareness of the mental object of ill will. Or if you have ego and you're noticing arrogance and you're noticing boastfulness, that's the symptom. But where it's coming from is the mental object of conceit, for example, right? So having awareness of these mental objects is to first learn what the 10 fetters are, because that's the mental objects. Those are the deeply rooted containers, because you're going to need to purify the mind of these mental objects. But you wouldn't be able to purify the mind of these mental objects if you didn't have awareness of them. So I'm going to teach you intellectually to understand what the mental objects are, but then you're going to need to have awareness of your mind to be able to see the symptoms that when they start arising, you'll be able to notice that. So if you can shut down through your mindfulness, having awareness of the bodily sensations, and shut down and cut off any arising discontentedness there, then you're going to stop this whole continuous stream of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, where you're feeding these mental objects, where the mind's becoming more and more polluted. Because when we were first born, we didn't have ill will in our mind, right? We didn't have anger and hatred in our mind when we were first born, because we didn't go into the nursery at the hospital hating other babies, right? We didn't go into the nursery at the hospital having conceit or ego. We weren't looking at the other babies in the nursery like, look at my blanket's better than your blanket, right? We didn't think that way. But as we aged, our mind took on this pollution where we became angry and had this ill will and we had this conceit, and we started comparing, like, look at what I got. You don't have this. This is why as a child we were so happy and so joyful, because we didn't have all these mental objects in our mind. But as we started aging, we took on this conditioning and this pollution, and these mental objects are now deeply rooted in the mind. So you're going to need to break those up and purify them. So you're going to need awareness of them. So the Buddha here with right mindfulness is teaching you generally to have awareness of your mind, but more specifically to have awareness of the bodily sensations, that early warning system, so you can take action to cut it off. Have awareness of the feelings that are being experienced in the mind, so you can cut it off there if you missed it as a bodily sensation. To have awareness of the general condition of the mind, so you can cut it off there if you need to. Preferably you would have caught it a lot sooner, but if you didn't, okay, you catch it as a condition of the mind. And then you can also see the symptoms of the mental objects that are arising in your mind. You're going to need to have awareness of all four of these things. And this is accomplished through meditation, which is the next step, this right concentration. We're going to be exploring this in our class tomorrow when we explore the jhanas, because here in right concentration, the Buddha is explaining the jhanas. He's explaining to you the results of having practiced the entire Eightfold Path, so that then you'll know that your mind's moving through these jhanas. So we're going to explore this in the words of the Buddha, tomorrow. But the way to practice right concentration is with developing a daily meditation practice and developing singleness of mind. The Buddha talks about this in other parts of his teachings. In the Eightfold Path, he describes the jhanas because that's the result of practicing the Eightfold Path. But in other teachings that plug into this, he teaches you to develop a meditation practice and to develop singleness of mind. And this is why we spend time on developing our meditation practice of breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation. These are the two primary forms of meditation that you're going to need. There's other forms too that you're going to learn in this course, but these two are the ones that you're building up to start with. And you'd like to build up to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more, realizing that this is going to take you perhaps 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more. So this is a gradual development of reaching up to this particular time frame. And then there's the practice of singleness of mind. This is going to help you with your concentration, that you just do one thing at a time. If you're used to eating and watching YouTube at the same time or searching social media, your mind's actually not doing those two things at one time. You're rapidly cycling back and forth. And this is going to hinder you from being able to cultivate concentration. Or if you're talking on the phone, you're watching TV, you're eating food, your mind's not actually doing all three of these things. Your mind's rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing. Or if you're in a business meeting and your mind's wandering and roaming, your mind's not practicing singleness of mind. So what you would like to do is you would like to just do one thing at a time. The Buddha teaches this. He says, if you're walking, know that you're walking. If you're eating, know that you're eating. If you're talking, know that you're talking. This is how you can develop focus and concentration. So if you're washing dishes, for example, and your mind starts wandering, cut that off, apply right effort, bring the mind back to the washing of the dishes. Or like right now, when you're listening to me talk, if you're hearing that sound outside and your mind goes and wanders, it's like, I wonder what that is. I wonder what they're doing out there. Cut that off, bring the mind back to the conversation that we're having here. Or if maybe as I'm talking, maybe you're thinking about lunch. And you're like, what am I going to have for lunch? And your mind starts wandering there. You cut that off and you bring it back. More and more, as you practice singleness of mind, your mind will stay in the middle. The analogy that I provide students is that if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you grinded this steel pole back and forth, this rod back and forth, when you first start doing this, it's going to bounce around a lot because your mind's not practicing singleness of mind yet. So when you grind the steel pole back and forth on the wood, it doesn't have a groove yet. So it's going to bounce around a lot. But if you do this a lot, where you grind the steel rod back and forth on the wood, you're going to get a deeper and deeper groove, and it's going to be less and less likely that this steel rod bounces out of the groove. But when it does bounce out, you'll know it, and you'll bring it right back. But eventually, you'll get so deep into this groove with this steel rod, it won't ever bounce out. So the same thing is true about your mind. If you stay focused and concentrated when you're washing dishes, when you're in a business meeting, when you're on the phone, when you're eating, when you're watching TV, if you practice singleness of mind in all parts of your life, more and more your mind will get that deep groove where your mind's concentrated and focused and it won't pop out. So your meditation is helping you to do this. When you're focused on the breath, you're practicing singleness of mind for that 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, however long you're meditating right now. But that's just one part of it. That's exercising your mind in meditation. You need to then carry that with you throughout your day so that no matter what you're doing, you're practicing singleness of mind and just doing one thing at a time. And now more and more, you'll get comfortable with the mind being in the present moment, practicing singleness of mind. You'll get that deeper and deeper groove, and then you can stay focused and concentrated all throughout your day. And this is how you develop it, through meditation, but then also through practicing singleness of mind in daily life. This is how concentration comes about. We're going to talk about this more on Wednesday morning, where I'm going to help you to understand more about developing concentration. But these are the first 2 things that you need from the Eightfold Path to really get you started with developing concentration. Okay, so to summarize this, the mental discipline section is taking initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate wholesome qualities. Right mindfulness is having awareness of the mind with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Now, be aware that in day-to-day life, people are oftentimes using this word mindfulness in a way that the Buddha didn't use it. And how they choose to use it is up to them, but you're going to need to understand it in the way that the Buddha used it. Sometimes you'll hear people say, can you mindfully carry this to the table? What they're really saying is, can you carefully carry this? Or someone might say, let's have a mindful conversation, or let's have a mindful dinner. What they're really just saying is, let's carefully spend time together. Let's focus on spending time together, right? So when the Buddha is talking about mindfulness, he's talking about awareness of the mind. Because in the unenlightened state, we typically don't have awareness of our mind. We don't have awareness of the thoughts and the feelings and the ideas and the things that go through our mind. We just kind of plow through life. We're knocking down the trees and burning up the forest. So while other people might use this word, I see it in talk shows and on the news, I see it in political discussions. They talk about mindfulness or mindful. They're typically using it as careful. They're just replacing the word careful with mindful. But you need to understand it as awareness of the mind, and more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And then right concentration is practicing meditation and developing singleness of mind so that the mind can then move into the jhanas and start experiencing the jhanas. And you do that through developing your breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation while practicing singleness of mind in daily life. Okay, so this is the Eightfold Path, the 8 individual steps explored now using the words of the Buddha and organized into 3 categories. Is there any part of this that you guys would like further details on? And for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom.
Just about the bodily sensations, you cited some...
I'm sorry, about what?
About the bodily sensations.
Bodily sensations, yeah.
You said if someone is excited, comes up to your chest and so on. Mm-hmm. For example, now I feel a bit my lower back, some feeling it's not hurting, or sometimes hear a bit that I think like, is this kind of bodily sensation, or you're talking about other, like the one exciting feeling coming up of the chest? And
yeah, the bodily sensations that you experience related to any particular contact that you're having is going to be unique to you. So I'm kind of giving you an indication of some of them. Not everybody experiences heat in the face when they get angry, but I know I used to. Not everybody gets pressure in the skull when they get angry or frustrated, but I know I used to, right? So these are just a couple of examples, but you're going to need to clue into this. So if you start being aware more and more of the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness, you'll start knowing that, hey, before I get happy or excited, I get this particular bodily sensation. For me, it used to be tingling across the shoulders, up the back of the neck, and over the skull. That's what I used to experience. But not everybody experiences that the same way. It might be for you, it might be kind of like here, right? Like is what you're describing. So you're going to need to clue into those, whether they're pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. Prior to the feeling, there's going to be some bodily sensations. And sometimes it's more than one, right? Depending on how strong the craving is. So when you clue into those, that's the building your mindfulness, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's your meditation that's going to help you to do that.
So some bodily sensations are not conditioned, right? So for example, this sensation I have here doesn't hurt. I don't have it often. It just realize it right now that I have it here. Doesn't mean that it's a sign for getting angry. It could be just a bodily sensation.
Right. The bodily sensations that we're talking about here, it's not like my back is hurting because I've been sitting for so long. That's not the bodily sensations we're talking about. Those are bodily sensations, but that's not what we're talking about with right mindfulness. What we're talking about with right mindfulness is the bodily sensations associated with craving, desire, attachment, and arising discontentedness. That's the bodily sensations we're talking about. Yep. Okay. Not seeing any other questions anywhere. Don't see any online either. So, okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to break for lunch. It's basically 12 o'clock. We're going to take an hour and a half lunch break. And then when we come back at 1:30, I'm going to share with you the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. And then, of course, we're going to start with meditation when we first get back from lunch. And then I'll be sharing with you that particular topic, which is going to broaden your understanding of the problems in the mind and also deepen it as well and give you the solutions to transforming the mind away from these 3 poisons, because it's these 3 poisons that are motivating all the unskillful conduct that you're experiencing. In order to improve your moral conduct, in order to improve your mental discipline, you need to know what these 3 poisons are so you can transform the mind. So I'm going to take you through these different layers of the 4 Noble Truths, the 3 poisons, and then later in the course, we're going to go into detail about the 10 fetters. And these are the problems that the Buddha is describing to you and showing you the cause of what's producing all the difficulties and struggles in the unenlightened state. So enjoy your lunch, and perhaps I'll see you guys at 1:30. Okay? Enjoy. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.